church when I lived in Berkeley, California. Being a teacher, I immediately gravitated to RE. After attending a meeting or two, I was asked by the chair to join the Religious Education Committee. I demurred, saying, "I'm not even a member of the church." She laughed and said, "Neither am I, and I'm chair of the committee." So what could I do? I was active in RE there until I moved to Tucson a short time later. When I joined the UU Church on 22nd Street, I again gravitated to RE. And before I knew it, I was chair of the committee there. During my 12 years or so as a member, I was active in RE most of the time, either as a member of the committee or as a teacher, or both. When this congregation was formed in 1988, John and I joined. For a while, I wasn't involved in RE since we had other members who took care of that. But after a few years, I found myself part of it again, both as teacher and committee chair. I've been one or the other or both for the last 15 years at least. In the course of my involvement with RE, I faced the inevitable question, what is the purpose of religious education? Here are some possible answers. 1, indoctrination. 2, knowledge of the religion's theology. 3, familiarity with the religion's holy scriptures. 4, providing a bedrock of faith to help in time of trouble. 5, learning how to live a good life. And there are probably many others. You might think what your answer would be. I've asked 3 of our members who were raised Jewish, Roman Catholic, and Protestant to describe their religious education. Roberta first.
Good morning. Good morning. And well, I was brought up Jewish, and growing up Jewish, and what was it like? Growing up Jewish was very different from my Gentile friends. The Jewish people have different beliefs than the Gentile people. Growing up Jewish gave me a lesson in spirituality. It helped me to grow into the person I am today. The original name for the people we now call Jews was Hebrews. Roberta, yes?
Would you please get a little closer?
A little closer, is that better?
That's good, thank you.
Big as my mouth is? The original name for people we now call Jews was Hebrews. The word Hebrew in Hebrew is ivri, I-V-R-I. It was first used in the Torah to describe Abraham, out of Genesis 14:13. The word is apparently derived from the name Eber, one of Abraham's ancestors. Another tradition teaches that the word come ever, which means the other side, referring to the fact that Abraham came from the other side of the Euphrates, or referring to the fact Abraham was separated from the other nations morally and spiritually. Another name used for the people is children of Israel, or Israelites, which refers to the fact that the people are descendants of Jacob, who is also called Israel. In common speech, the word Jew is used to refer to all of the physical and spiritual descendants of Jacob, Israel, as well as to the patriarchs Abraham and Isaac, and their wives, and the word Judaism is used to refer to their beliefs. Technically, this usage is inaccurate, just as it is technically inaccurate to use the word Indian to refer to the original inhabitants of the Americas. However, this technically inaccurate usage is common both within the Jewish community and outside of it. Question, what is a Jew? A Jew is any person whose mother was a Jew, or any person who has gone through the formal process of conversion to Judaism. It's important to note that being a Jew has nothing to do with what you believe or what you do. A person born to non-Jewish parents who has not undergone the formal process of conversion but believes everything that Orthodox Jews believe and observes every law and custom of Judaism is still a non-Jew, even in the eyes of the most liberal movements of Judaism. And a person born to a Jewish mother who is an atheist and never practices the Jewish religion is still a Jew, even in the eyes of the ultra-Orthodox. In this sense, Judaism is more like a nationality than like other religions, and being Jewish is like a citizenship. What do Jews believe? This is a far more difficult question than you might expect. Judaism has no dogma, no formal set of beliefs, that one must hold to be a Jew. In Judaism, actions are far more important than beliefs. Although there is certainly a place for belief within Judaism. They have 13 principles of faith, very much like the UU Church has 7 principles. The Jews had 13 principles. The closest that anyone has ever come to creating a widely accepted list of Jewish beliefs is Rambam's 13 Principles of Faith. These principles, which Rambam thought were the minimum requirement of Jewish beliefs, are: 1, God exists; 2, God is one and unique; 2, God is incorporeal; 4, God is eternal. Prayer is to be direct to God alone and no other. The words of the prophets are true. Moses' prophecies are true, and Moses was the greatest of the prophets. The written Torah, which is the first 5 books of the Bible, and oral Torah teachings now contained in the Talmud and other writings were given to Moses. Number 9, there will be no other Torah. 10, God knows the thoughts and deeds of men. 11 is God will reward the good and punish the wicked. The Messiah will come. The dead will be resurrected. As you can see, these are very basic and general principles, yet as basic as these principles are, the necessity of believing each one of these has been disputed at one time or another, and the liberal movements of Judaism dispute many of these principles. Judaism is not a set of beliefs about God, man, and the universe. Judaism is a comprehensive way of life filled with rules and practices that affect every aspect of life. What you do when you wake in the morning, what you can and cannot eat, what you can and cannot wear, how to groom yourself, how to conduct business, who you can marry, how to observe the holidays and Shabbat, which is the Sabbath on Friday evenings and Saturday mornings, and perhaps most important, how to treat God, other people, and animals. The set of rules and practices is known as halakha, H-A-L-A-K-H-A-H. I know I'm not pronouncing it correctly, sorry. It's been a long time. The word Jewish law, that actually means Jewish law, is usually translated as Jewish law, although a more literal and more appropriate translation might be the path that one walks. The word is derived from the Hebrew root high-lamed kaf, meaning to go, to walk, or travel. At the heart of Jewish law is the unchangeable 613 mitzvah commandments that God gave the Jewish people in the Torah. Did not bring in all 613. I've given some information to Margaret where I pulled my information from offline, and it's actually could be a whole sermon. There's like a vast amount of information on Judaism. While growing up in my family's home, we observed this way of life: the keeping of kosher, or light the Sabbath candles, prayer after meals once or twice a day. By conforming to this way of life, it increased our spirituality in our lives and in our religion. As a child, I can remember observing this way of life, along with observing all of the Jewish holidays. There are 13 holidays: Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, Shemini, Azeret, Simchat, Torah, Hanukkah, Tu B'Shvat, Purim, Pesach, which is Passover, Lag BaOmer, Shavuot, and Tisha B'Av. All Jewish holidays begin in the evening or the date specified on most calendars. The Jewish calendar is linear, by the way, not like the normal calendar is. It doesn't start on the same days as the regular calendar does. This is because a Jewish day begins and ends at sunset rather than at midnight. Work is not permitted on Rosh Hashanah, on Yom Kippur, on the first and second days of Sukkot, on Shemini Atzeret, on Simchat Torah and Shabbat, in the first, second, seventh, and eighth days of Passover. The work is prohibited on these holidays, the same as that prohibited on Shabbat, except that cooking, baking, transferring fire, and carrying, all of which are forbidden on Shabbat, are permitted on holidays. For Jews who work in the Gentile workforce, observance of these holidays can be problematic, as most of these holidays fall on a weekday. A Jew will need to take 13 vacation days per year. This is more vacation time than some people have available. Growing up, our Jewish family observed, took the time off from school and worked to observe the holidays as necessary. I grew up in a Gentile neighborhood, so I was teased and tormented by the children I grew up with in my schools. I was called names by those who did not understand why I was not in school in the middle of the week, or why I could not go out and play in the streets on Friday night, and why was I walking with my parents to Friday night temple services. The Jewish people did not carry money nor ride on the Sabbath. If your synagogue or temple was within walking distance of your home, you walked, or if not within walking distance, you hired a driver of a non-Jewish religion to drive you. Very much like the UU Church, the Jews did not take up collections on Friday nights to support the temple and pay the rabbi, but we pledged a portion of our income to assist with the expenses. Like the UU Church principles, the Jews have their principles. It is amazing how many different religions have stemmed off of the Judaism principles and how we observe them today. I broke away from the Jewish way of living a very long time ago. I found the ritualistic way of living was too much for my lifestyle. I have visited and been a member of other churches in my life. I was baptized in the South Carolina Baptist Church. Coming to Tucson, Arizona, I was a member of Water of Life Congregation Metropolitan Community Church. And from there, I've become a member of Mountain Vista Unitarian Universalist Congregation, where I feel most at home and welcome. But you see, because I was born of a Jewish mother, I will always be a Jew. Thank you. And I'll leave this with Margaret so that she can have it for references. Thank you.
Would you put that up?
Oh, you don't want to go?
No, I don't.
Will you reach it? Oh,
I fall off of things. I'm not gonna stand on it. The talking head. I couldn't compete in any ways with the erudite and wonderful presentation you've done.
Thank you.
But I'm going to do it different. I have lived long enough to have two lives. One is Roman Catholicism. I didn't have a choice. I got dumped right in the middle of it. 1938, I went to first grade in the first year of my Catholic 13-year service with my little pencil clutched in my left hand. Oh, but that changed very quickly. There was a boy 2 seats in front of me who got the ruler. In 1938, the good nun used the ruler. She was whacked on the desk and said to him, "You cannot write with your left hand. It is the hand of the devil." I immediately became right-handed. Dropped the pencil. She came by and looked sullenly and said, "Can't hold it very well." I said, "No." That night my mother said, "What are you trying to do? You're dropping food all over the place. You're eating with your right hand." I said, "Yep, it's in use now, not my left hand." So I went to elementary school in the parish church place. Well, we had to walk. My sister and I walked 7 blocks back and forth. You got there by 9. You had a lunch break and you had to run home and then get back by 1. And then you were out by 3:30. This went on for 8 years because those days the Catholic parishes had school from 1st to 8th grade. Well, that wasn't just the education of reading, writing, and arithmetic, but I got to memorize a lot. There was the catechism. Does anybody here remember having a catechism? If you have, raise your hand. I got really good. I could give all answers, but it was a problem because I got to be known as the questioner. That was not good. My mother would get reports about that there was a problem. I kept asking questions. So they said to me, "Claire, your problem is this." My sister had her answer. She said, "Keep your mouth shut." She said, so they said, my problem was that I did not have faith and I wasn't obedient. That was not good. Onward to high school. That was really exciting. It was a Catholic high school, only girls. Didn't have we had to keep it separate, we were dangerous. Because the story was that as a girl, you were right down the line from Eve, and Eve wasn't so good herself. She passed on the apple. And so that's why men were all in trouble. So I was of the second fiddle because I was a girl. So off we went. Well, of course, the first thing was they were going to make me an appropriate Catholic woman, which meant I had to learn to sew. Uh-oh. Now, I read very good, but when they put me in front of the sewing machine, they had to call the serviceman. They tried different sewing machines. The good sister took me out in the hall and explained to me, God gives people different talents. Evidently, yours is not sewing. So I was sent to the library. I was really good in the library because I went to school already reading because I read the funny papers with my mother. So I read fast, and I also had the keys to the science library. Now, the Catholic schools were very selective at that time. This is, remember, beginning in 1938, plus 13. I don't think they get away with this now. So different chapters were select in the science books. So you know which one was not done, reproduction. I got to read all the science books. So I knew the whole story, and nobody else did. Well, now I am out of high school, almost. And this girlfriend of mine, who's a wonderful Irish mother, said, picked out this wonderful Catholic college up in Adrian, Michigan. And we went up there, right? I thought it was fabulous. Well, maybe it was away from home. So I signed up and my girlfriend dropped out. She went somewhere else. So there I am, up there in a Catholic girls' college with the only other group there with a Methodist seminary college. Needless to say, neither promoted any relationship. So what happens? The rules. You know, all the way through this, you know that I've had a lot of rules. Of course, the big one at that Catholic college was no smoking. There was a tree about 15 feet from the end of the driveway, and all the girls would join there, and the tree looked like Hiroshima. We all sit out there on the main road, stand there, sitting on the rock or the ground and smoking. Well, to continue my harassment of the situation, I went to Reverend Mother and said, I've got an idea. I figured out a place in the basement. There's no curtains or furniture, and I found some old tin cans. We could use that for ashtrays. And we could have a smoker in the basement. That didn't go over too good. But I found out after I left, because Reverend Mother did make the suggestion by the end of the year, maybe I should go somewhere else. So I did. Came back to a place called Fenn College in Cleveland, Ohio, which is now Cleveland State University. And there I was. And of course, you know, my Catholicism was wearing kind of thin. And meantime, I'd gotten myself into a marriage and 3 kids, and that didn't work out. So after 19 years, I'm a single woman with 3 kids. And I just couldn't go back to the church, especially since my cousin, who was a priest, made the announcement that he could get my marriage annulled. And I said, that isn't going to work because of the children. So I didn't go to church anywhere. And you know, one of the things that stuck with me, and this is what Catholicism did to me, put in a lot of what you can't do. The first time I walked into a church, other than I thought for sure something would fall on my head or I would trip over something. And I didn't. Then it happened. A teacher friend of mine said, Claire, I got this wonderful ticket for a clam bake. Now, I would go anywhere. This is back in Cleveland, for a clam bake. Got my $10 ticket, and I'm set to go. She calls me and says, I'm sick. And I says, that's too bad. She says, well, you can't go. And I says, why can't I go? I've got a $10 ticket. I went off that night to a Unitarian Universalist church, which, you know, the additional rooms, they had a clam bake. my gosh, they were wonderful people, and they didn't have horns coming out of their head. And they produced a wonderful clam bake. And they invited me back the next day, which was this, clam bakes are always on Saturday nights. So on Sunday, I went to my first Unitarian Universalist service. And guess what? I could ask questions. And people could even say, give me an answer, or say, I don't know, but we could look it up. The main thing I have found in Unitarian Universalism is the permission to ask questions. That I had the right to seek my own road, my own path, my own determination of what is and what isn't. And you know, there's that standard joke when someone asks what religion they've been. Most Roman Catholics often say, I'm a recovering Roman Catholic. Because it takes a lifetime to get rid of the concept of evil and the sin aspect. And it's such a treasure to have a place where children are encouraged to think for themselves and above all to ask questions. Thank you.
I would still be a Methodist, but for one small minor fact that I don't believe in Jesus as the Son of God. I have a question for you. How many Methodists does it take to change a light bulb? It's undetermined, because whether your light is bright or dull or completely out, in the Methodist Church you are loved. You can be a light bulb, a turnip bulb, a tulip bulb, and in the Methodist Church you are loved. The Methodist Church, by the way, will have a church-wide lighting service next Sunday. You're all invited to bring a bulb of your choice and a hot dish. In many, many ways, that joke sums up my religious education in a United Methodist Church in southern Minnesota. My takeaway from those years was a message of inclusion and participation, and while not necessarily encouragement, at least the freedom to interpret. Methodism is, of course, a Christian faith, but throughout Sunday school, confirmation, youth groups, Bible study, church camp, and so on, the stories that were told to me were that, stories, to be interpreted as guides to a way to live. For example, I took my doubts about the meaning of the Trinity to my minister during confirmation instruction, and he really frustrated me because he didn't tell me what to believe, but told me that he was confident that I would find my own answers. I found many of the rituals and traditions enjoyable and very grounding. The anticipation of and finally being able to get that first Bible in 3rd grade, being allowed to be an acolyte starting in the 5th grade, moving from the children's choir to the adult choir as a teenager, what we refer to as a do-it-yourself communion for Christmas Eve, where the church would be dark, just candlelit with music in the background, and it would be open for several hours, and you could go in and take communion and pray alone. And I loved those nifty little numbered envelopes that we sealed our quarters in each week. And of course, my brother and I loved to time the intro of the inevitable joke made by our larger-than-life minister promptly at 5 minutes into the sermon. The laughter of the adults in that sanctuary each week gave me a feeling of being part of a larger and loving family. In reflecting on this topic, I find that my parents' involvement in the participation and modeling of the other adults in the church was very important. It was probably more important than the lessons that I learned. I have a fair knowledge of the Bible, Methodist theology, and its traditions, but the interest of and the consistent efforts of those adults had a much more lasting impact. Our church was very large. Our classes often had 2 or more classrooms of 15 to 20 per grade, and my confirmation class was over 50 students. So we had many, many resources. There was a very elderly former school teacher who would drive her Model A, park illegally in the back, and play the organ in children's chapel. There were young married couples who would chaperone Friday night dances for the whole community in the basement. And there were many, many, many people who taught, chaperoned camping trips, organized our pancake suppers, and on and on and on. Our associate minister's wife, because that was a position, kept her back door unlocked for us as we traipsed downstairs to hang out, and she'd give us snacks, and she never, ever, ever told us we were too loud. My religious education wasn't a perfect model. I would in no way call it challenging. The most out there thing we did as a youth group was visit churches in the area to see the differences for ourselves. But we lived in a small town that portrayed itself as white, Christian, where married people, which meant somebody married to somebody of the opposite gender, had 2 to 4 children that were all conceived after the wedding, that sort of thing. So our out there wasn't so far. Social action was very sanitary and distant. It was sending money to people that were far away and didn't look like us. But despite the easy nature of my religious education, I did gain a lot. First and foremost, it was a connection to a larger and loving community. Second was a base education in a dominant religion, but something from which I could springboard. And it helps me as an adult now, knowing that the Methodist Church has evolved as well. And third was an appreciation for rituals and tradition within a church community. I didn't thank many of the adults that shaped and guided my RE experiences, and this assignment prompted me to call my parents and thank them again. So my message today, if I have one, is that all of our efforts for our youth are of a greater and long-lasting value. And that's whether your bulb is bright or dull.
Now, I grew up in a Methodist church too, and I went to Sunday school every Sunday. The thing I remember best is the little 4-page leaflets we got, like this. There was a reproduction of a famous painting of a scene from the Bible on the front, and then inside the story, the Bible story, and questions to make sure we had understood the message. And another technique that I remember was having us memorize and recite Bible verses, which I will spare you. The result of this was a strong familiarity with the Bible that has stayed with me, and that was very useful to me as a student and teacher of literature, since Western culture is saturated with biblical references. So I have to conclude that whatever the intention, the main effect of my early religious education was to teach me about the Bible. Roberta learned, if I have understood her correctly, that actions and not beliefs are the most important thing in Judaism, that Judaism is a way of life inherited from your mother. Clare learned that asking questions was a no-no, that there was a lot of negativity, sin, emphasis on sin and on what you don't do. And I probably am not interpreting her exactly right, but that's what I got from her speech. Sher had an experience of a loving community and a family that was important, a church family that was important. So we all learned different things, and some of the things we learned are not what they taught us explicitly. If you were brought up as a UU a couple of generations ago, you may remember Martin and Judy. Is there anyone here who remembers Martin and Judy? I don't think anyone here is old enough. They were the Unitarian counterparts of the public schools Dick and Jane. Their stories were among many curricula authored, co-authored, or edited by religious educator Sophia Foss during what I call the golden age of Unitarian curricula. That was in the 1930s and 40s. Foss' philosophy of religious education was a radical departure from tradition. She believed that children should develop their own ideas and questions about religion based upon their experiences and observations, rather than being told what to believe. Her works include Beginnings, creation stories from long ago in many lands, world religions, Jesus the carpenter's son, Moses, Joseph, the church across the street, and the old story of salvation, a concise narrative of traditional Christian theology. I used many of these curricula when I taught over at 22nd Street 40-some years ago now, and I think they enhanced my own religious education. These are all part of what's called the New Beacon series. Most of them are now out of print, but I do have a collection, and I will spread them out up here in front after the service if any of you would like to look at some of these books. I think that Sophia Fa's ideas do continue to influence our UURE. We still teach world religions and creation myths and Bible stories and moral values. And we are constantly striving to make the learning experiential. We don't want to replicate the public school experience. We want our children to enjoy coming to church and to have fun with their friends when they get here. We want to include physical activity, creative crafts, playful competition, and dramatic acting, among other things. Here at Mountain Vista, our stated mission for RE is to create an open and diverse learning environment that will foster our faith and spirituality through fun and fellowship. I'd like to think we're succeeding in our mission, at least most of the time. We have fun and fellowship even at our committee meetings. And they're intergenerational, which I love. A recent one, there were in attendance Emily and I from the grandparents' generation, Jan, Sabella, Donna, Christy, and Laura, parents' generation, Stephen, Desi, and Bibi, teens, and Nathaniel and Cassidy, two of Jan's babies. I'm very proud of the way our teens have taken leadership roles in RE. Stephen has been on the RE committee for the last 2 years, and Bibiana for the last 1 year. 5 of our teens have been assistant teachers for the younger kids in RE this year. Allie, Ashlyn, Bibi, Erica, and Stephen. And Ingo is now our nursery attendant. What a great way for them to live their UU values, foster our faith, and be role models for the little ones. This year, the Tigers class, that's the youngest ones, used Holidays and Holy Days, a world religions curriculum. To learn about other faiths, the kids, among other things, made masks for African religions, assembled and ate a plate of traditional foods to celebrate the Jewish Seder, and made a dragon to celebrate Chinese New Year. In the TAMS class, that's the middle school class this year, we used an immigration curriculum to prepare for GA. One of the sessions that the kids liked best was a scenario of immigrants crossing the desert, trying to avoid capture by the Border Patrol. Our property here was ideal for this enactment. It was certainly an open and diverse learning environment. Although they only did it for less than an hour, I hope the kids realized how hard it is for immigrants to avoid not only the Border Patrol, but sharp cactus spines, painful walking on uneven terrain, and fatigue from carrying heavy backpacks and jugs of water. Another activity was a game about illegal immigration, similar to Monopoly. At many points, the immigrants landed on a space that sent them back to Mexico, and they had to start all over again. Even when they got to the end at 1, they were still here illegally, living in the shadows without any rights. Some of the older kids participated in the Gateway Project, where they learned video techniques and recorded some of these scenarios and others, and interviews with members and friends who had immigration stories to tell. In YRUU, the kids experienced fun and fellowship by meeting and socializing, as well as discussing questions of faith and spirituality that were on their minds. You will remember that they put on a service that focused on friendship, one of the topics they discussed. Last year in Coming of Age, the kids did lots of activities, some physical, some intellectual, but they focused on faith and spirituality by developing their own credos and their own elevator speeches about UU. In the 2 OWL classes that we offered this year, that's the sex education classes, the students learned a lot about physical sex, but also experienced an attitude towards sexuality consistent with their UU faith. Next year, the Tigers will be using a We Believe curriculum about UU values. And the TAMS will be using one called Traditions with a Wink, focusing on UU concepts and rituals. Most of these previous examples illustrate a recent concept in religious education. Well, actually, it's an old concept, but a recent name for it, called the implicit curriculum. This is what we learn that hasn't been explicitly taught. And I think that's most of what we've been talking about here today with our speakers. For example, many of us, like Claire, learned that asking too many questions about religion was not a way to be praised or rewarded. Part of the implicit curriculum in our congregations is the way we act with one another. I've always been proud of this congregation's RE program and its commitment to meet the needs of all our children. Without explicitly saying so, we are teaching acceptance of differences, respect for every child, encouragement to question what we are told, and the value of community in our lives. So although we have a wealth of curricula and many ways of teaching facts, I don't worry too much about whether the kids learn specific ones. They are learning what we're not teaching, how we live our UU values. Yes, it's important for them to know something about our history, and it would be nice if they could recite all 7 UU principles. Wow, how many of us could do that? It's more important for them to be part of an organization that practices these principles. Yes, it would be nice if they could give an elevator speech explaining what Unitarian Universalism is and what our values are. But it's more important for them to shape their actions according to those values, to be always found standing on the side of love. I'll close with these words from Robert Fulghum, a UU minister. All I really need to know, I learned in kindergarten. Most of what I really need to know about how to live and what to do and how to be, I learned in kindergarten. Wisdom was not at the top of the graduate school mountain, but there in the sand pile at Sunday school. These are the things I learned. Share everything. Play fair. Don't hit people. Put things back where you found them. Clean up your own mess. Don't take things that aren't yours. Say you're sorry when you hurt somebody. Wash your hands before you eat. Flush. Warm cookies and cold milk are good for you. Live a balanced life. Learn some and think some. And draw and paint and sing and dance and play and work every day some. Take a nap every afternoon. When you go out into the world, watch out for traffic. Hold hands and stick together. Be aware of wonder.